Trick or treat!
Ah, visitors. Welcome. Candy? Of course, my dear. But nothing comes for free in my place. First, you must sit and listen to my stories. When they're finished, you may choose, do you still dare to venture out this Halloween night? Or will you stay safely indoors until midnight? During these tales, I'll share some photos with you. And I must warn you, some are quite disturbing. So when you see this little crow, close your eyes if you scare easily. Now then, are you ready? Our first story begins with the summoning ritual. Have you ever heard of something called 剧本杀? The name literally means script killing. It's a really popular social game in China. You can think of it like a mix of murder mystery party, role-playing, and a bit of live theater. Each player gets a script, plays a character, and together they try to uncover what really happened. Who's lying, who's innocent, and who's a killer. But it's not always about crime. There are all kinds of themes. Detective stories, sci-fi adventures, romance dramas, and of course, the one I'm about to tell you, the horror theme. It seems when the lights go off and everyone's deep in character, something else joins the game. This story comes from a girl named Ling. During her junior year of college, there was this 剧本杀 store running a Halloween discount for horror-themed scripts. Ling was tempted, so she gathered some friends to try it out. There were 6 of them in total, 2 couples, plus Ling and her best friend. They chose the story in a school, and Ling and her friends got minor roles. The main character, it was a man named Wang. His roles got the most things, and in the end, this young man completely lost himself in the game. Actually, there was another reason Wang was so excited. The script included a ritual to summon a spirit using a pen, the pencil theory. The ritual part in the script was surprisingly detailed, hundreds of words describing every single step, almost like it was real. However, the shop owner did mention that if anyone feels scared, they could skip that part and it wouldn't affect the story. So one of the girls immediately said she didn't want to do the ritual. But Wang didn't say it that way. He looked thrilled and tried to reassure everyone, saying, "Oh, come on, don't be scared. Ghosts aren't even real. Besides, I actually want to see what a ghost looks like. If one shows up, watch me beat it up." Eventually, after some back and forth, the girl finally gave in. So the 2 couples sat around a square table, holding a pen together, and started the ritual. They chanted the first line, nothing happened. Wang was still joking around, not taking it seriously. Then they started the second chant, but this time was different. The pen slowly began to move. Now you might think, maybe one of them was pranking the others and moving it on purpose, but no. Ling remembered it clearly. The moment the pen started moving, Wang's face froze completely. But the other 3 looked totally normal. They all just assumed it was Wang moving it. Then, slowly, the pen tip slid across the paper and wrote 2 Chinese characters, 吊死, hand to death. At that moment, everyone just froze. So that's the answer? But what does it even mean? Before anyone could say a word, the lights flicked back on. The creepy atmosphere instantly vanished, and everyone let out a sigh of relief, blaming the whole thing on Wang. But Wang, he had gone pale. Cold sweat was dripping down his forehead. Still, he didn't say anything. After all, he couldn't show weakness in front of his girlfriend. The next part of the game requires someone to go into a classroom and retrieve a diary. Of course, the task wasn't that simple. First, they had to carry a candle down a long, dark hallway, find room 4, go to the 4th row, 4th seat, and get a notebook. If you know anything about Asian culture, you know that the number 4 sounds like the word for death. Basically, it's considered super unlucky. Originally, one of the girls was supposed to do it, but Wang, trying to act brave, volunteered and refused to bring the NPC staff along. Sure enough, he grabbed the candle and walked out of the room while the 5 others waited for him. But 5 minutes passed, then 10, 15, no sign of him. Well, this was strange, because walking down that hallway and back should only take about 3 minutes. Did Wang get lost? Or did he go to the bathroom? At this point, another guy named Liu offered to go check, but he came back quickly, looking uneasy. He said he checked the bathroom, but Wang wasn't there. He'd even looked inside every stall, all empty. Now everyone started to panic. The shop owner quickly wrapped up the game, and they all went out to look for Wang. They searched through every seat, classroom by classroom, and finally, sure enough, they found him in room 4. Wang was sitting exactly in that designated seat, holding the diary in his hand, but he seemed to have lost consciousness, frozen and completely still. His girlfriend freaked out and ran over to call out to him, but before she could get close, a scream pierced the air. Wang's eyes had rolled back, lips were purple, throat was making this choking sound, and his whole head was straining upward like a drowning person desperately trying to reach the surface. Apparently, he was suffocating. Life was hanging on a string. One of their group was a medical student. He quickly laid him on the floor and started CPR, while the shop owner called an ambulance. Honestly, the situation was extremely critical. The paramedics worked on him for quite a while, and thank God, he finally woke up, physically fine. After that, everyone helped him back to the shop, and that's when he slowly told them about an experience that made everyone's blood run cold. When he first entered the hallway, everything seemed normal. The fixed seat, the props, the dim lights. But about halfway down, the environment changed. The decorations around him faded, replaced by a realistic school corridor. Classrooms lined up on both sides, papers fluttering in the air, even the smell of old books hanging around. For a moment, he felt like he had stepped into a real school, but he assumed it was just all effects, so he kept going until he reached classroom 4. That's when things really started to feel off. The small room that was supposed to have 20 desks now have 60 or more, stretching endlessly into the dark. Standing at the classroom door, Wang was confused. Finally, he stilled himself and rushed in to grab the diary, but the moment he touched it, his whole body locked up. He couldn't move. And even worse, he felt an insane force push him down into the chair. Then, slowly, something tightened around his neck, constricting and pulling upward as if trying to hand him. Panic set in. He struggled desperately, trying to turn his head, but there was nothing there. Meanwhile, the invisible rope kept tightening, pulling higher, and soon he started to lose oxygen. So by the time everyone found him, he had completely passed out. After hearing his story, everyone went silent. No one dared to speak. They couldn't help but think back to the Pen Fury ritual from earlier, and the words that Pen had written, hand to death. Maybe they had actually summoned something real. In the end, the shop owner deleted that script and refunded their money. To calm everyone down, he even treated them to dinner and kept apologizing. But Ling still believes that what happened wasn't just coincidence. She thinks Wang's joke and disrespect might have offended something. After all, 4 people took part in the ritual, but he was the only one who got haunted. But the shop owner also mentioned that, in the ritual, what should have been written on the paper was one of the girls' name. That's what had always happened before. But this time, for some reason, it only wrote hand to death. This story comes from Wei, and is something that happened to him when he was a child. Wei grew up in a small county in Inner Mongolia, right on the border of 3 provinces. Because of that, the area has some really unique customs, and one of them was the Summer Festival Parade. Every year, people would gather for a huge celebration that lasted all day. Street performances, local snacks, handmade crafts, but the most exciting part, the Yu Opera performance, a traditional Chinese opera style from Henan province. Back in those days, there was no TV in the village, and theater was the ultimate form of entertainment. So whenever a show started, everyone would show up and sit there for the whole afternoon, completely mesmerized. The story we're telling today is about an opera, but apparently, it wasn't performed for the living. It was 1991, and we was just 6 years old. When summer came, the festival kicked off like it always did, and the kids spent the whole day running around, playing and laughing. Summer heat was always unbearable, so soon the kids ran down to the river to catch fish. Thanks to the heavy rain upstream, there were plenty that day, a real feast for them. Just when the boy were having the time of his life, the sky started to grow dark. Wei looked up, all his friends were gone. He glanced at the shimmering water and thought, well, I'm already here, might as well catch a few more. But that small decision almost cost him his life. As he waded through the shallow water, Wei suddenly heard drums and gongs echoing from afar. Oh, the play was about to start. With no hesitation, he changed directions and ran toward the festival excitedly. Of course, from our point of view, that's already strange. The festival usually ended by dusk. There shouldn't have been any performances at night. But Wei was just a kid. He didn't think too much, just followed the sound, skipping happily along. Soon, he arrived at the square, but something was off. It wasn't crowded like usual. In fact, the place was empty. A small stage stood in the middle, and on it were children about his age, dressed in colorful costumes, performing an opera he never heard before. Wei was amazed. Kids performing opera? How cool. Not thinking too much, he just found a tiny stool and sat down to watch. Just as he was getting absorbed in the performance, someone tapped him on the shoulder, but that hand, it was ice cold. The moment it touched Wei, a chill ran straight through his body. He turned around. Behind him stood a little boy, dressed as Cao Cao, face painted white and black. He must be one of the performers. Do you like the show? Wanna come sing with us? Oh no, I can't. You guys are really cool though. That's okay, I'll teach you. Come on, let me get you dressed. Before we could say anything, the boy grabbed his hand and pulled him behind the stage. It was completely empty. No props, no costumes, nothing like a real backstage at all. The boy brought him to a small mirror and started painting his face, first white, then black, with patterns across the cheeks. Wei giggled. Now he really looked like an actor. The boy stared at him for a moment, then gave a creepy smile and said, "This is the last step. Just stay still." He picked up a brush, dipped it in red ink, and placed a small dot right in the middle of Wei's forehead. However, the moment the brush touched his skin, everything went black. When Wei opened his eyes again, he was surrounded by darkness. Everywhere in the distance, a voice echoed, calling his name. It was Grandma's voice. Panicking, he looked around, but no one was there. Then he saw it, a large white lotus flower burning faintly on the ground. He ran to pick it up, but the moment he touched it, it vanished, only to reappear farther ahead. It was as if the flames were guiding him through the dark. With no other choice, the boy followed the flowers, running deeper into the endless darkness. After what felt like forever, a massive wooden wall rose up before him. He didn't know why, but somehow, he just knew. If he could climb over that wall, he'd be safe. He started walking along it, trying to find a spot to climb, but the surface was smooth, impossible to grasp. Just as anxiety started to creep in, a huge wooden pole suddenly dropped from above, connecting the wall to the ground. At that moment, Wei knew this is the only chance. Without thinking, he grabbed it and began to climb. Before long, he reached the top, but then the world spun and everything went black again. When he opened his eyes once more, he was still in darkness. The air was freezing cold. Then, a rough but warm hand brushed his face, and someone was calling his name. Slowly, his vision cleared. It was his grandmother, tears streaming down her face as he gently patted him. At that moment, we knew he had survived, and tears burst from his eyes. Later, Grandma told him what had happened. That night, by 8 p.m., he still hadn't come home, so she went out searching and found him lying unconscious near the old performance ground. He was stiff and ice cold, like a corpse. Grandma thought he was gone. She clapped to the ground, but suddenly felt the faintest pulse. Without hesitation, she carried him home. She called the village doctor first, but he found nothing wrong. Everything seemed normal. Then Grandma noticed a red dot on Wade's forehead, and she understood immediately. Some evil spirit had taken away his soul. She kept calling his name over and over, but he only let out small, weak sounds. So Grandma folded dozens of paper lotuses, stuffed them with cotton and oil, and lit them one by one, chanting his name again and again. Finally, she lit a large candle, gently patted his chest, and kept calling him, until, at last, Wade opened his eyes. So in the end, he survived, but things never went back to normal. At night, he started seeing faces, painted masks swirling in the dark, their expression twisted, laughing silently. Even when he closed his eyes, they didn't go away. He couldn't sleep at all. He just sat on the bed, quietly crying to himself. His father, furious and desperate, borrowed a butcher's knife and began swinging it wildly through the air, trying to cut them down. In Wade's eyes, every time the blade slashed through a mask, it shattered, only to reappear moments later, circling him again. It didn't help. Finally, his grandmother placed a kitchen knife wrapped in red thread under his pillow and brought home a statue of the god of wealth and war, a fierce protector holding a golden ingot and a huge blade. And strangely enough, after all these methods, the masks were gone. The statue and the knife stayed by his bed for 5 or 6 years until he went to middle school. But ever since that night, Wade's never been able to enjoy an opera again. Those painted faces, they no longer looked beautiful to him, only terrifying. This story happened in the summer of 2005 in Beijing. Qiang, the original poster, was just 7 years old. Back then, the old Hong Kong movie Mr. Vampire was all the rage, and Qiang and his buddies were obsessed. Every day after school, they carved rough wooden swords and ran around, pretending to fight ghosts and perform exorcisms. But after a while, playing with fake weapons just wasn't exciting anymore. So one day, Qiang suddenly said, "What's the point of playing like this? I know some old houses in the village. Let's go explore them." The other boys hesitated. Obviously, not everyone had that kind of courage. But ultimately, curiosity got the better of them. "Let's go." Qiang set his sights on the edge of the village, where an old house sat quietly, abandoned for at least 20 years. According to some villagers, a long time ago, the owner had mysteriously moved away in a hurry, leaving everything behind. Over time, rumors spread. They'd been scared away by ghosts. This was just a legend, but naturally, a perfect place for their expedition. Before going, Qiang made special preparations. A pitchwood sword, a few talismans he'd drawn copying the movies, a shiny pocket knife, and a flashlight. The next day at noon, they set out. Soon, the 3 of them arrived at the house. Qiang tried pushing the door, but it was locked, and no brass padlock holding it shut. But before he could figure out what to do, one of his friends, Ah Ming, grabbed the rock and smashed the lock. With a sharp crack, it broke apart, and then, slowly, the door creaked open on its own, as if something inside was inviting them in. The house was a complete mess. The courtyard was overgrown, with taller than a person swayed and hissed in the breeze. A half-collapsed shed leaned in the corner. The windows were covered with torn paper, trembling softly in the wind. At this point, the three boys looked at each other, and nobody dared to be the first to step inside. Qiang paused, pulled out talismans with trembling hands, and said, "Don't worry, we've got talismans." He threw a few into the yard, then jumped in himself, waving for the others to follow. Honestly, Qiang was terrified inside. With each step, the dry grass cracked and crunched underfoot, the sound echoing unnaturally in the silence. But the worst part wasn't the noise. It was a strange, bone-chilling cold. Even in the heat of summer, it wrapped around them so vividly that no one could ignore it. Finally, they reached the house. When they pushed open the door, an icy gust rushed out, and pure darkness awaited them. Keep in mind, it was noon, and the house had windows. Yet for some reason, the room swallowed all the light like a black void. Seeing this, Jun fumbled with the flashlight and finally switched it on, but the moment the beam swept across the floor, they all froze in their tracks. Paper effigies, dozens of them, men and women, painted so realistically that at first glance, it looked like dozens of human bodies lying on the ground. Jun flinched, and Aming quickly said, "Relax. I remember the owner used to make paper figures for funerals. This must have been left behind." That explanation calmed them a bit. Jun moved the light around the room, the paint peeling off the walls in huge patches, a thick layer of dust on the floor. In the bedroom, an old bed sat under a sheet, so black and spotted it looked like huge mold stains. But on both sides of the bed stood a delicate small wooden cabinet, all it knew compared to everything else. Their curiosity took over again. They stepped inside and slowly opened the cabinet door, but the moment they did, all three boys froze in place. Was there anyone else in this place? Qiang wanted to scream, but his throat tightened. No sound came out. Aming reacted first, ready to go check it out, but in the dark, he bumped into the wooden stick, propping up the window. The air froze, a suffocating feeling of being trapped pressed in. And right then, from outside, the faucet handle began to creak. "Run!" Qiang suddenly roared, instantly breaking the dead silence. The three finally snapped out of it and bolted for the door, tripping, bumping, clawing their way out into the sunlight. The three ran home without hesitation. When Qiang got home, it took him a long while to recover. After calming down a bit, he called the others. Thank God, everyone made it home safely. But then Aming said, quietly, "Qiang, I took that cabinet with me." Qiang's mind just snapped. Why would he do that? That idiot, he was only going to make things worse. But at the same time, he couldn't help being curious. What was inside? Without another word, he rushed over to Aming's house. In the courtyard, the three boys gathered around and cautiously opened the cabinet. Inside were some old belongings, a pen, a dried-up ink bottle, a folding ruler, and a yellow dictionary with a faint, blurry name. Nothing special. In the end, Aming took the dictionary and Qiang took the ruler. But Qiang felt guilty about it, so he carried the cabinet back to the house, left it by the door, and went home. But do you think the spirit of that house would just let them go? Of course not. The next morning, several cars were parked outside Aming's house. Something had happened. Turns out, starting last night, Aming had been acting really strange. Every time she fell asleep, he suddenly sit up in bed, eyes closed, crying and shouting, "It's gone! My stuff is gone!" His mother was terrified. He tried shaking him awake, but he didn't remember anything. This happened several times before she finally asked if he'd done something unusual lately. That's when he confessed everything about the old house. It was serious. Amin's mom immediately contacted the house owner's family through the village chief, and the very next day, they rushed back. Meanwhile, things were much better for Qiang. At breakfast the next day, his mother said, "What's wrong with your forehead? It looks dark." Qiang touched it. No dirt or anything. He rushed to look in the mirror, but what he didn't expect was that his face was pale, a bloodless, dead white. Not only that, the face in the mirror didn't look like him. It was someone else's face. The more he looked, the more scared he got. He tried smiling, but the reflection didn't move. It just glared back, blank, expressionless, eyes full of hatred. Now, Qiang knew something was really wrong. He rushed back to the dining table, thinking about how to tell his parents, but as he ate, he suddenly couldn't help crying, and his body started shaking uncontrollably. His mother was horrified. He immediately called his uncle, a spiritual medium. The moment the uncle stepped inside and saw the boy, his face tightened. Then, without a word, he began covering every mirror in the house with cloth and took Qiang's hand. Strangely, the second he touched him, Qiang stopped shaking. Then the uncle walked to the corner of the yard, murmuring something under his breath. He took out a small gourd, took a sip, and spat the liquid onto the wall. Shockingly, for a brief moment, a human-shaped shadow appeared on the wall, and then vanished. At that instant, Qiang collapsed and lost consciousness. When he woke up, it was already the next morning. His mother was outside, burning paper money and placing food near the old house, a silent offering, an apology. After that night, Qiang slowly recovered. Later, he learned the truth. The house had once belonged to a lonely old man who made paper effigies for funerals. One night, he got drunk and accidentally fell inside the house. By terrible luck, he landed right on a bamboo stick and it pierced straight through his throat. Blood spilled everywhere, and that's how he died. So those dark spots the boys had seen weren't mold at all. They were dry blood stains. That day, they broke in, disturbed his resting place, and even took his belongings. It was only natural that he came back for them. After the incident, the old house was torn down and rebuilt. But even now, whenever villagers pass that spot, they quicken their steps. No one ever looks back. Well then, my dear visitors, our tales have come to an end. Here's your candy, as promised. You've been such patient listeners, thank you very much. But before you go, please let me know, do you still dare to venture out into this Halloween night? The night is still young and the darkness is full of possibilities. But remember what you heard tonight. Sometimes the things we disturb don't simply go back to sleep. Sometimes they follow us home.